Start 60 and see 4 left small cut, 55 right. Good luck. Left
going after not what I think is necessarily the most interesting, but it's the most accessible part of the space-time headset that I could try to model. And if I can get quarks and gluons, then we can climb up to, nucleus, and then atoms, and then molecules, and then neural systems, and then maybe the brain. In terms of getting the map. So again, I of course am aware of the neural correlates of consciousness, and there are important constraints, but targeting directly from the theory of conscious agents to that, I think, is not a wise move scientifically. You will be waving your hands and having just so stories for a long, long time if you just do that. I want precise data predictions.
So where would your definition converge diverge? So did you come to agree on both definitions?
I think we have to be very careful about saying that we agree. I mean, if we straight away agree, it's not a very valuable agreement. It just sounds similar.
The audience been pushing that question. They've been asking a lot of questions, so they're pushing this question. They want to know where is the definition converge and where is it diverge. All of them want to hear from both of you.
Right. I asked this question to Brian Greene, who's a cosmologist at Columbia. He was launching his book, I think, Until the End of Time, which is more metaphysical than physics. So he was doing it at Harvard University, and at the book talk, I asked him, these theories, cosmological theories in the Upanishads, and how do you relate them to modern understanding? And he said something very insightful. He said, look, these theories in Vedanta, they are not scientific technically, but they seem to be poetic rendering of certain insights that we are getting in cutting-edge science. So that's from Brian Greene.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're more than just poetic. I think that there's been some hard-won insights from years of meditation and deep thought. So it's beyond poetry. But I would say that yes, I think at top level there is enough commonality of the ideas that it's worth pursuing. In the sense that as a scientist, you'd be well advised to listen to the insights from, like Vedanta and other spiritual traditions, again, with the same grain of salt that I give to any of my scientific colleagues and their theories, right? You have to be hard-nosed about everything. But being hard-nosed and being closed-minded are two different things. So absolutely be hard-nosed, but and if someone's just talking nonsense, then I wouldn't even bother to try. So what I'm saying is it's clear that we're saying things that are very, very similar at top level. And so the insights that come from the spiritual tradition, I would be a fool to ignore them as a scientist, because I think that they're hard-won insights. And I would be a fool also to take them at face value. I'd be a fool to take any scientific theory at face value. So there's hard work ahead. But the fact that there's enough agreement that it's worth doing that work is what's exciting to me.
Let me give you a specific example, not from science, but from the modern philosophy of mind. So when I studied the modern philosophy of mind, the basic course, the 101 course which people get in university, one immediately gets the impression that it's a field which has stopped. The last person who said something major breakthrough would be Descartes 100-300 years ago. Cogito ergo sum, the mind-body dualism which he set up, and that's still the paradigm which we're still struggling with in the modern philosophy of mind. If you look at the papers and the philosophy of mind, the last 100 years, they neatly fall into two categories. There's one category trying to reduce mind and consciousness to neural activity, or to language, or to behavior, or some permutation of or to information lately. And there's another group of papers which say, sorry guys, it doesn't work. Whether it is what it's like to be a bat, or Thomas Nagel's paper, or many other papers since. The paper about Mary seeing red for the first time, the color red, and so on. So this is where it is at. And my suggestion is that in order to break this deadlock and make some progress in the philosophy of mind, the insights of ancient Indian philosophy I'm quite sure they'll be very helpful. I'm not just saying right away now, but there are a number of British schools which I know are very powerful insights, mind and consciousness. So that's one area when we can dialogue and it can lead to progress. It's a very limited area, just the philosophy of mind itself.
That's right. No, I completely agree with that. And, you know, the philosophy of mind is also intersecting with the science of mind. And so that the science of mind can also help. And here you see Irvine, we actually have a lot of interactions between philosophy and science. We have a department that looks at that. And I agree, but I also agree that much of the current philosophy of mind and the science of mind is physicalist and reductionist or functionalist. And none of it, as we've said, none of it can give us, no theory can give us a mathematically precise account of any specific conscious experience. In terms of actually giving me a theory of, you know, the taste of mint, the smell of garlic, the headache, when asked the philosophers of mind and also the scientists who are trying to understand consciousness, give me a specific example that your theory takes care of. There's nothing, literally nothing that they can do. And at some point, that failure, it will cause a revolution. When they realize that the failure is principled, it will cause a revolution. And and by the way, almost none of my colleagues in cognitive neuroscience and studying consciousness, almost none of them understand what's happening in high energy theoretical physics, what space-time is doing. Many physicists don't know. I was in a conference a few months ago where there were a number of quantum theorists presenting their theories of consciousness. And I made a point at the end of several of their conferences to ask them, well, what do you think about the work in high energy particle physics, theoretical physics, that says the space-time is doomed? And none of them had heard of it. So these are PhDs in physics. So my colleagues in cognitive neuroscience studying consciousness can be forgiven if they don't know about this. But the train is coming and it's going to wreck that whole program. The space-time being doomed is a huge train wreck for basically all of the current theories in the philosophy of mind. Most of the theories in the philosophy of mind are basically almost all the theories in cognitive neuroscience and artificial intelligence for consciousness. And so we're seeing some tremors, earthquakes in the field right now. There was a group just a couple weeks ago who put out a paper, more than 100 signatories, saying that one theory, integrated information theory, was what they called pseudoscience. So there's already the failures to produce any specific models of any specific conscious experiences are starting to lead to problems inside the people, I think. And at some point, they'll realize that an actual paradigm shift is required. That functionalism and reductionism and physicalism all disappear when you realize that space-time is doomed. And the physicists are the ones who tell us that space-time is doomed. So it's time for us consciousness researchers to get with the program and start to think outside of space-time. Or we're just going to be the dinosaurs that are laughed at in the history books.
I think where science and philosophy and spirituality are agreed is, on this point, Patricia Churchland, she said, I remember reading her saying that we don't need philosophy to understand consciousness. We just need to do more neuroscience, and you keep doing neuroscience and you'll understand consciousness. That's what now we are beginning to see is not right. Scientists, philosophers of mind, and philosophers in the field of spirituality, we are sort of coming to this conclusion that just a physical investigation of the brain will not solve the question of consciousness.
I agree. So it's not to say that we shouldn't do neuroscience. Of course, we need to do the neuroscience, but that's not going to be the final answer. In fact, neuroscience, in my view, needs more funding because it's far more complicated than the neuroscientists realize. They think that when you look inside a brain and you see neurons, that's the truth. That's the reality. No, that's just an interface projection of something that's far more complicated outside of space-time. We have to reverse engineer what we see in the brain, the neurons and the neural networks and the dendrites and the synapses and all that stuff. That is complicated as it might seem. There's 86 billion neurons and 84 billion other kinds of, there's just tons and tons of different kinds of cells. There's a new atlas that came out that there's 3,300 different types of neurons or something like that. So it's really complicated, but it's trivial compared to what's beyond that. It's just a projection of a much deeper reality, and we're going to have to reverse engineer neuroscience and understand the dynamical systems outside of space-time that project into what we call brains and neurons. And so I think we need the neuroscience, but I agree with you that to say neuroscience is it, and that will give us the answer, absolutely not. It gives us the data that we need to explain with a theory that's completely outside of space-time.
So Don, throughout your extensive research and exploration and consciousness, I wonder, have there been moments or periods of introspection where you question or maybe reevaluated your own beliefs and theory? How have such moments, if they occur, influence your idea, Don?
Yes, I came into this research fundamentally with a physicalist framework in mind. I mean, I was raised in the Christian church, but I think all of us are physicalists and materialists. Just by nature, we are identified with our bodies. We're afraid of the death of our bodies. We are physicalists deep down, no matter what we say. And so I was a physicalist, and I consciously and unconsciously brought that to my research. But when my own research began to tell me that maybe everything that I was seeing was something that I was making up, that maybe this is just a headset. When that happened to me in 1986. We were working on this mathematical model of consciousness, and in 1986, I still remember the moment when it occurred to me what our math was saying, that basically this is just a headset, and everything I'm seeing is just a virtual object on my headset. It was just such a shock to me that I had to sit down for a while. I mean, it was just overwhelming. But I realized that my own mathematical modeling was forcing me to that conclusion. And later on, when I found that evolutionary game theory says the same thing, and then when I find the physicists are saying that space-time is doomed, those are like big moments for me, where my whole physicalist framework that in some sense we're almost born believing in physicalism. Having that stripped off has been quite a shock to the system. So I do spend a lot of time in meditation, partly to grapple with all this stuff that's so counterintuitive and so counter to my own emotional, orientation.
Except in my case, in Don's case, it was breakthroughs, new knowledge, new paradigms. In my case, the tradition was giving me these understandings, but I just didn't get them. There was a deeper and deeper understanding of what I had always been reading and always been hearing. Clarity came over the years.
I started my journey last year because I have experience. That's why I start with Don, and I start with Bernardo, and then I start with quite a few philosophers before I get to here with Swamiji, and yeah, I can resonate with Don completely. Yeah. I'm going to move on to a very quick question. So to both of you, so how do you differentiate between what is objective
Welcome
real
back, Elias.
and our perceptions of reality? Because we still live in this reality realm, isn't it?
So the way we would deal with this question in Advaita Vedanta is, you ask the question, what is the criterion of truth? If we keep making claims about this is ultimately real, that's an appearance, immediately you have to define how do you define truth? How do you define reality?
Yeah.
And in Indian philosophy, we have multiple definitions of reality, of truth, criterion of truth. Um, I just put before you two theories or two criteria of reality. One, the Buddhist criterion, or the Advaita Vedanta criterion. Then the contrast will make it clear what we are talking about. So the question is, how do you decide what's true? The Buddhist criterion is practical efficacy. If a thing works, has effects as it is expected to have, there's water and you drink it and it quenches your thirst, it feels cold and it quenches your thirst, so it's water, it's real. Whereas the water in a mirror is not real, because when you go there and try to use it the way it's supposed to be used, it doesn't work. You clearly realize it's not there. That's practical efficacy, is that criterion of truth. If it works, it's true. And it's amazing what a resonance it has with modern American philosophy, the whole school of pragmatism, William James, John Spears, and all that. Now, the Advaita Vedanta says to this is that, look, practical efficacy cannot be a foolproof criterion of truth. You could drink water and it quenches your thirst, and the next moment you could wake up and it was all a dream. So the water was in a dream and your thirst was in a dream and experience of drinking water was in a dream. It was cancelled. So Advaita Vedanta criterion of truth is non-cancellability. So, the classic example of a snake and a rope, you realize it's not a snake. Oh, it is a rope. I mistook it for a rope. That which cannot be cancelled is real. Now, what is it that can never be cancelled on principle? And Advaita Vedanta says all cancellation depends on consciousness. You have to be conscious of an error that would seem to be true. Now you have to be conscious of, you realize, oh, that was not true. This is true. Now, the only thing that cannot be cancelled in this picture is consciousness itself. Because to have the experience of cancellation of consciousness, you still need consciousness. Consciousness cannot be cancelled. This is kind of a distant echo of Descartes' I think, therefore I am. The only one thing that cannot be counted. So yes, this is the criterion. Everything is a perception to consciousness. Consciousness itself is revealed to itself as the ultimate truth, the ground of all perception. Keeping the proviso that as far as our practical life is concerned, driving a car, going out shopping, all of that works within the headset using John's paradigm metaphor. All of that has to be given due importance. You can't dismiss it as a dream. Within the realm of perception, within the realm of projection, science works, common sense works, in art, religion, all of them have their spheres of operation. But all of it is grounded in consciousness, but as understood the way consciousness in itself, the non-dual reality.
I like that. I think that's a very, very good answer. And I would just add a couple little things from the scientific point of view. There's a technical notion called local realism, which is a particle satisfies local realism if it has a definite value of its properties like position, momentum, and spin, and those properties have definite values even if they're not observed, and the locality, that's the realism part. The locality says they have no influences that propagate through space-time no faster than the speed of light. And local realism appears to be false. The Nobel Prize in 2022, just last year, was for empirical confirmation of predictions of quantum theory that local realism is false. So we have, from the scientific point of view, it's still some controversy. There are some scientists who, like I think Sabina Hassenfelder, who would say it's not really local realism that's false. It's really maybe the superdeterminism is true or something like that. So I mean, there's still some debate to be had, but at least the question has a precise statement in physics, and experimental tests are being done on it, and it appears that local realism, in the sense of local realism, is false. And maybe Sabina will be able to show that superdeterminism takes care of it, and local realism doesn't have to go up. My guess is that local realism is false and superdeterminism may be true both. So it's not either or. What that means is, if the particle doesn't have a position when it's not observed, it's not there. But if you don't have a position, you're not there. So it's not real in the sense if I'm wearing a VR headset and I'm playing Grand Theft Auto, and I see in my VR set a red Ferrari to my right, well, that red Ferrari only exists when I look and render it on my headset. As soon as I look away, there is no red Ferrari. There's not in the supercomputer that's running the game. There's no red Ferrari anywhere. So the red Ferrari has a position and a color and a shape only when I look. So local realism is false for the red Ferrari because the red Ferrari is just a headset symbol that pops up and renders when I look. And that's what it looks like physics is telling us about space-time. Particles are like the red Ferrari. They don't have a position or momentum and spin when you don't look because you haven't rendered them yet. So you have to render them in your headset. So that's one way in which we could say that realism in the typical sense is false, and which would agree with what you were saying. And there's another, I'll just put out a little distinction between sometimes the word real, when we use the word real, we use it in two different senses casually. One is to say it's real if it exists even when no one looks. So we might say the moon is real because it exists even when no one looks. Although I just gave an argument for why it doesn't, but still someone might say that, right? So that would be one sense of real. But another sense of real might be like, I have a real headache and my headache is real. Well, would the headache exist if no one perceived it? Well, of course not. It's actually because you perceive it as a headache that you have a headache. So, but you wouldn't want to say that it's not real because it doesn't exist when no one perceives it. So we use the word real in these two different senses, and apparently no object is real we think about the moon being real in the first sense, it exists even when no one perceives it, but we're going to have to give that up because space-time is doomed. So essentially the moon is like a headache, and so they only exist when you perceive them, and that makes the distinction between public objects and private objects more problematic. Right? We say the moon is a public object because you and I are both seeing the same moon. Well, actually, we're not seeing the same moon. You're seeing the moon in your headset, and I'm seeing the moon in my headset. You have a headache in your headset, and I have a headache in my headset. So the distinction between public and private objects actually dissolves when you realize that space-time is doomed.
That reminds me of a sub-school of Advaita Vedanta called Drishti Shrishti Vada, which translates, you'd be excited to hear this, Don, which translates into seeing is projection. So the way they look at this entire universe is, as you see things, experience things, they are being rendered for that time, and then they disappear back into the limitless consciousness plus causality. But that's one sub-school here.
That's brilliant, because they came up with that before we had VR headsets. That's brilliant.
But it's much easier from the inside-out perspective, because that's what it seems to be the world, like
very, very good.
Yeah, the question, since it's a kind of inquiry into who you are, it's an inquiry, but you can also investigate it as a model, as an exercise. Is there any place where these two can ever meet? The logic of looking at one question, because the science and spirituality.
I think that was the theme of the whole discussion. I would look at it this way: if it meets, it's wonderful, but the understanding is more important than the actual meeting. It's good to have the dialogue so that there's cross-fertilization. As Don himself said, because of the super specialization in science, you have genetic scientists or cognitive scientists who don't know the latest stuff in particle physics. You have particle physicists who don't know the latest stuff in particle physics and another area of particle physics. So this kind of conversation between philosophy, spirituality, science, I think it sort of cross-fertilizes and gives us new ways of looking at it, which may further help our present investigation itself. That's at the very minimum.
Yep, I agree, and I think it's in the nature of spiritual investigations and scientific investigations that they will always only just be perspectives. The spiritual traditions are very clear that everything we say is just pointers. And science, I think, is very, very clear that our theories are just theories, and we never will have a theory of everything. And that's part of who I am, is something that transcends any particular pointer or any particular scientific description. The investigation of who I am is, in principle, endless.
Yes, that's where, when classical meditation or inquiry, when the one inquiring or observing everything has come to the point of to the end of inquiry, what is it that is inquiring after that?
I think that's a good question. I'll just start with Don left off and say that he said it's an endless quest. The way what Advaita would say at that point is, it's not endless, it has an end for you. When you find peace, you find that ground where you have transcended suffering, and you can check for yourself that has it helped you to overcome suffering, that deep insight. And yet it is also not a clear end, because you are no longer able to state it. See, an end to a scientific inquiry is when you are clearly able to state mathematically or otherwise what is it that you have found and make a proposition out of it. But by its very definition, being beyond concepts and beyond language, you cannot state it precisely. If you could, it would be an object of language, again something limited. So in that sense, it's endless. But for the inquirer, for you, Prakash, for us, there is an end. What we started off with, transcendence of suffering, solution to the great mystery of universe, consciousness and mind, there is an answer to that. But that answer is not formulated. You cannot formulate it in speech, but it will satisfy you. And there have been this whole tradition of mystics and people in every spiritual tradition who have found it, and they have, at least personally, they have found the end of their quest.
Well said.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Swamiji. The question, I had difficulty to find differences, but I think I have spotted one, which is that obviously Don multiple times basically mentioned the sort of notion of incompleteness, that we can never through science reach a ultimate description or the final description or something. So it's going to be always a better and a better version of description. Now in non-duality, there is a famous description which is about Purnamadam Purnamidam. So here actually completeness is described as the end. So this is a question to both of you. How do we have to reconcile these two, or will these two descriptions remain always separate? It's more or less in the direction of the whole discussion, but yeah, I'm curious about your reactions. Thank you.
I don't think the difference is as much as you make of it, because whether it is the Purnamada, the verse mantra you referred to, or when I said the ultimate reality is beyond limitations of time, space, and object, is it final? Advaita Vedanta would claim it is final, and there are other philosophies in the ancient Indian tradition who oppose that. And I think what has been happening in Indian philosophy also is further and further refinements of some central insight. It's not that one of them was right and the other was wrong. They all got that insight, and that helped them to overcome suffering, that completed their spiritual project. But when they wanted to express it logically and put a framework on it, those frameworks can be improved upon. And even if I think Advaita is the final word, you can always ask me, so what is the final word? And I have to tell you that it's beyond language. So in that sense, it's not complete. It's still incomplete. Technically, it's you have not defined it within language, and nor can you. You have just managed to show why it cannot be and should not be. Give a final label on it. Why language will fail. It's a little bit like Wittgenstein in the early Wittgenstein in the Tractatus, who says the world is all that is the case, and the limits of my language are the limits of the world. And then he goes on towards the end to say what lies beyond the world must be passed over in silence. So again, very evocative, but that's the answer I would give. Yeah.
Right. I would agree. I would just say maybe the same thing, just slightly differently, and just say that if you're going to do descriptions, then there's endless descriptions. But if you recognize that I am that reality, and you embrace yourself without concepts and just be yourself, then there is the end of description, and there is an end in that sense, but then you can't really talk about it. But you know it in a sense that transcends any conceptual knowledge.
Don? Don, you mentioned obviously that in your sort of work, there's no arrow of time, but still it is dynamic. And what is dynamic is probably the artifact of the headset itself. So-called, in my understanding, it sounded like ripples of mind or some kind of a philosophical explanation. Now, as a result of no arrow of time, obviously we'll have no entropy. So what, for me, the fundamental question here was, are we, or are you, I mean, obviously, are you able to formulate mathematics where there would be no entropy as such in the whole? Or how do we, is this even a valid question? So I'm very fascinated if we are able to formulate mathematics where there would be zero entropy all through.
Right. So just a slight technical thing here. It's Markovian dynamics, and you can write down a Markovian dynamical system in which the dynamics is what they call stationary, and in that case, the entropy doesn't increase. It's not that there is no entropy; it's that the entropy doesn't increase. So the entropy is so there is no arrow of time in terms of like a second law of thermodynamics in which the entropy is always increasing, and that gives you an arrow of time. But when it's straightforward to write down stationary Markov chains. It's no big deal. And those, the entropy doesn't increase, and so they don't have an entropic arrow of time. But it's a simple theorem, 3 or 4 line proof, a pretty straightforward proof, that if you take that stationary Markov dynamics and project it onto a dynamics that loses some information based on conditional probability, then that projected dynamics itself will have an arrow of time as an artifact of the projection process. And so I take that as that's the headset having a notion of time as an artifact of loss of information. If we had the full information, we wouldn't need the notion of time. We probably wouldn't need objects, and we wouldn't need evolution, by natural selection, and competition. All those things are entirely artifacts of wearing a particular headset.
Yes. I mean, that was very fascinating because it sounds like basically when one is in meditation and there is no Bayesian sort of things going on, right? When one is completely in first-person perspective, it sounded almost the same to me as when there is stationary. You mentioned a particular name, but it's a fascinating answer. Thank you. I see a lot of
Thank you.
If I can add an amusing side note to that, an entropy discussion reminded me of a very cute story by Isaac Asimov I read as a kid. It's called The Last Question. And basically the story is somebody asks a computer, can entropy be reversed? And the computer says there isn't enough data about it. And then the story goes on and on with succeeding generations of computers over millions. The story is set over billions of years. The computer just gets becoming more and more sophisticated till it becomes a cosmic mind. And the universe finally dies a heat death. There's nobody left. Finally, the computer gets the answer. And it restarts the arrow of time because it wants somebody to give the answer when the story ends with the computer saying, let there be light. And there was light.
That's a brilliant story.
Brilliant story, really. Cute and very fascinating.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivy, for facilitating this wonderful speakers and thinkers. Highly appreciated encounter, and I have 2 questions at least. And the first is for Donald, because as I understood the reasoning with evolutionary theory, and you come to these metaphors like, of course, the headset is well known, and the desktop, the icons on the desktop. I always think, why do you say at a certain point that one has to realize that the body is only an avatar? Because if you think about it, as the survival programmed evolution says, hey, stop, don't touch this vessel with a knife. This blood vessel, if you touch this blood vessel with a knife, this is very dangerous. Sorry for my words. And so don't think that this is completely consistent in a way, sorry, because if you think it to the end, it's not only icons, but knobs and sliders. And when we have objects and evolution has made us like this, then we have to listen to our illusions, so to speak, as a traditional philosopher would put it, illusions, because they are very useful illusions. Like, here is the brain, here's the heart, here are the blood vessels, be careful, because your heart will pulse if you're in a dangerous situation, for instance. So why deny this, what Nietzsche would call the wisdom of the body? Why deny the body? Why deny that we only have one life and say it's just an avatar? Don't care so much about your shitty avatar. Your body is not so important, because the religions have taught us that don't care so much about it, because you have an afterlife. So how can you bring together the scientific worldview, which you are still committed to, because you are often saying my colleagues are asking for predictions, and I totally understand it. What's the consequence? What's the advantage? What's the prediction? And so, on the other hand, you say, why should I care about my body? And this is a question about evolution and your consistency of the theory. And the other is, what is the way to go? Because you are meditating, of course, Swami is also in meditation, and your masters in it probably. And then traditional, we have also art, poetry, and reading ancient texts to get some wisdom. So we have different gates to knowledge. And so how is it put together? Is it like a mixture for you? Or would you say, like when we had the Wittgenstein point here 5 minutes ago, in a way, you stop the description, you stop the reasoning, you stop the rationality, and you have to accept it that the rationality is good for going to Mars or to the moon, but for your existential questions, rationality will not be the vehicle to bring you the step to the wisdom. So this was the second question. Thank you for listening.
So to deal with these two questions, first, I know that Don has a very specific answer to the question about not touching the blood vessel with the knife, though the knife and the blood vessel both might be appearances of consciousness, but you still don't do that. He has an answer and he'll answer that. From a Vedantic perspective, or not just Vedantic, any spiritual perspective, both the Abrahamic religions or the Indian religions, all of them, or Chinese religions, all of them will tell you to listen to the wisdom of the body. I think Nietzsche was rhetorical. So in order to prove a point, and he had a wonderful point, but in order to do that, he downplayed the wisdom of religion. Sort of rhetorically, I think. So every religion, in different language, in different metaphor, with different theology, will tell you to respect the wisdom of the body, the wisdom of the mind, the wisdom of society, of family, of community and nation, all of that. But they are not ends in themselves. This is what distinguishes any religion from non-religion. Any religion will have an element of the transcendental. It's this old atheist Freud. He was wise in this way. He didn't believe in any religion, but he said religion is defined, is characterized by the transcendental. So every religion, every spiritual tradition, whether talking about God or Buddha nature or the emptiness or the Tao or Brahman, talks about something that transcends material reality, including material body. That's all. No, none of them tell you not to eat or to kill yourself or neglect yourself to the point. There have been religious practitioners who have done that, and unwisely so. One of our Swamis used to put it this way: don't abuse the horse you cannot dismount from. Don't abuse the horse anyway, but don't abuse the horse you cannot dismount from. As long as you have the body, there is a wisdom of the body, as you said. I think the answer comes from this anecdote. It's a real story. One of our early Swamis, Swami Turiyananda in the early 20th century, a great non-dualist, when he's talking about non-dual Vedanta to a group of pilgrims in the Himalayas, and they're sitting around the fire and talking about philosophy. One of the gentlemen, in great irritation, said to the Swami, "Look, if you think all of this is an appearance in consciousness, I challenge you to thrust your hand into this bonfire." And the Swami got up in great excitement and he said, "Yes, I will. And my hand will be burnt. But I, the witness consciousness, I am untouched by the fire." And he was rushing towards the fire. Luckily, people caught him and pulled him back. But this shows the difference, that nobody's denying that the hand, if there's a fire, the hand will get burned. So anyway, so Don's here. The question about the knife touching cutting your blood vessels with the knife, it's an illusion, then why don't we do it?
Right. Well, no, I agree with what you were just saying. That is the right answer. I could maybe just put it in other words. When you're playing a game, you have to play by the rules of the game. We're in a VR headset game right now, and if you want to stay in the headset and play the game, don't destroy your avatar. If you destroy your avatar in the game, if you let it get shot up in the game, then game over and you're out of the avatar. So while I'm here, but it's one thing to take care of your avatar so you don't get knocked out of the game. It's another thing to identify with your avatar, and those are two different things. So don't identify with your avatar is great because it tells you that when the game is over, it's not game over for you period. It's just game over for that game, not for you and your consciousness. So yeah, respect your body, treat it well as long as you want to stay in the game, but also that when your body gets cancer or gets heart attack, whatever it is that's going to kill you, to just identify from the body and realize that you're just taking off your headset.
Yeah. Hi, Don. So hi, Colin. So my basic question is that what is the smallest problem that we can tackle, to answer some of these questions? So in my opinion, it's basically like how we imagine a sparrow, how we imagine something in our head. See, in our inner space, we have all the freedom to do whatever we want. So that's also a field of reality, like external reality. And because I can create a sparrow in my head, and I can basically extend that logic, and I can say, I have created the whole of reality. But I here is not, of course, the body mind. It's awareness or consciousness or whatever we call it as. The point is like, how can we convert this into a proper scientific experiment kind of a thing, where basically we need to explain all aspects which are involved in it. If we just limit to brain, for example, it won't work, right? Because it will be incomplete, because we are not considering everything that's participating in creating up that sparrow in your head, right? And of course, it's not just accessing memory to create a sparrow, the whole action of creating a sparrow. And so in my opinion, the smallest experiment that we can create and literally force the humanity to really explain it 100% is something that no, I just wanted to point that it's extremely important to problem. Consciousness is the important problem, and people are not giving importance to it. And I just hope that by creating it the smallest possible experimentation or whatever, because we say that when we move our hand, actually it's the consciousness that moves the hand, right? A system cannot self-control itself unless you assume superdeterminism. So I just wanted to say that something like that needs to be done, is what I feel.
I would just respond that the scientific community is now taking consciousness quite seriously, and that there are hundreds of researchers, first-grade researchers, many of them my friends and colleagues, who are brilliant and are working very, very hard on the problem, and they're realizing how hard the problem is. And so I agree that, and from my point of view, to make the kind of progress that I want to make in this field, I need to show that a theory of consciousness outside of space-time can make predictions like gluon and quark momentum distributions inside the proton. It can make precise predictions that are correct, that match the data. That's when science will take consciousness outside of space-time as a very interesting, and not before. They won't, until we can do something like that. There's no beef, and they won't be terribly interested.
No beef. Okay.
From a spiritual perspective, it has always been like a community of believers who believe in a certain worldview, but that doesn't work too well nowadays, because the worldview, at least for educated thinking people, no matter what they might believe in, the worldview is constructed by science. Right. And so if the original question was, how would you get people of the world to accept the primacy of consciousness? In that case, it has to come pretty much through science, not through, say, just Advaita Vedanta. Not everybody in the world is. The Advaita Vedanta works, or any spiritual tradition works in two ways. Either you buy into it, you believe it, or you pursue it as an inquiry and you know it. But that already presupposes you are interested and you are inquiring into it and you're practicing, and then finally you get to know it.
And not the atoms, molecules, or like protons, etc., etc. Because everything is otherwise just a projection. It writes on the abstract reality.
Scientists won't be quite persuaded because they do have their own ideas about what imagination is. They have a notion of what you might call generate and test. So they have their own computational ways of trying to talk about creativity and imagination and so forth. So what we really need to do is to show that there's a theory of consciousness outside of space-time that can do something that they can't do with any of their theories inside space-time. That's the only way to really get them to take consciousness quite seriously.
Thank you all thank you, Ivy, for organizing this and for the speakers. So my question is about emergence and complexity. And I'll try to make this brief. So it's often said that like physics explains chemistry and chemistry explains biology or geology or something like that. Maybe explains that chemistry is consistent with quantum mechanics. Nobody with complete knowledge of quantum mechanics would ever like predict the periodic table, or maybe part of it, but they certainly wouldn't predict, complicated protein folding and things like that. But all that complicated protein folding is completely consistent with quantum mechanics, and so the same could be true about biology and geology and all these different levels of science that kind of get to different levels of complexity. But no biologist would ever say chemistry is doomed. Like that would be sort of silly, right? Like, so I feel like when you say something like space-time is doomed, you're sort of, I don't know, you're being sensationalist. It is emergent, perhaps. Actually, we're not sure, right? But it sort of seems like it is. And 10 to the negative 33 or whatever the number is, that's a really small distance. Like you make it seem like there's reason to think that there's some connection between that space scale and where we are now. But if you think that, like what I guess by what mechanism would something on that scale affect something on our scale? So I just think that the distance between, say, quantum mechanics and consciousness, you're really banging both ends of the scale. Like consciousness, our brains are the most complicated thing we know of in the universe, and the complaint that we can't tell the difference between the smell of garlic and mint, it seems like an odd complaint. And if anybody ever did explain it, it would simply shift to, well, what's the difference between mint and cilantro? So it seems like a moving scale that can never these questions like, what is it like to fill in the blank? They seem designed to not have answers. 40. They seem designed to be revered, not to ever answer. So I just feel like, can you comment on like where exactly, what's your problem with emergence? I feel like there's a lot we don't understand. That is certainly true. But to say that like science has failed to explain or can't explain imagination, it's the question that you wouldn't ask.
4, 3, 2, 1.
So,
go. Right, 40, 4 left of crest, 60, 4 right.
Sure, great question. So space-time is doomed isn't a phrase that I made up. It's David Gross, the winner of the Nobel Prize for his work on the quantum chromodynamics, wrote that in the 2005 paper in honor of Einstein's centenary of special relativity. He said, "Thank you, Einstein, for space-time. Wonderful, wonderful century, but space-time is doomed." And he went on to explain why he and several other physicists like Ed Witten and Nathan Seiberg and Andrew Strominger and more recently Nima Arkani-Hamed, all these high-energy particle physicists are saying, or theoretical physicists are saying, space-time is doomed. And so I'm a cognitive scientist. I'm not the one who came up with that as the physicist. And if you want to see why the physicists are saying this, there's an easy way to there's a great set of lectures by Nima Arkani-Hamed. And if you just Google Nima, which is Nima, Harvard Lecture 1. If you just Google that phrase, NEMA Harvard Lecture 1, you will find a graduate class that NEMA Hamed gave at Harvard in 2019, the fall semester of 2019, and it's something like 27 lectures, and he will explain to you in great detail why space-time has to be doomed, why quantum theory itself cannot be fundamental and has to arise from
Can you comment on like where exactly
at the hip from a much deeper theory of something outside of space-time, not curled up inside.
Have answers. They seem designed to be revered, not to ever answer. So I just feel like can you comment on like where exactly
starts slight right.
what's your
40.
problem with
Good luck.
I feel like there's a lot we don't understand. That is certainly true. But to say that like science has failed to explain or can't explain imagination, it's a question that you wouldn't ask of other fields. It seems to me. So can you fill in your thoughts on complexity and emergence? Thank you.
Sure, great question. And so space-time is doomed isn't a phrase that I made up. It's David Gross, the winner of the Nobel Prize for his work on the quantum chromodynamics, wrote that in the 2005 paper in honor of Einstein's centenary of special relativity. He said, "Thank you, Einstein, for space-time. Wonderful, wonderful century, but space-time is doomed." And he went on to explain why he and several other physicists like Ed Witten and Nathan Seiberg and Andrew Strominger and more recently Nima Hamed, all these high-energy particle physicists are saying, or theoretical physicists are saying, space-time is doomed. And so I'm a cognitive scientist. I'm not the one who came up with that. It's the physicist. And if you want to see why the physicists are saying going after not what I think is necessarily the most interesting, but it's the most accessible part of the space-time headset that I could try to model. And if I can get quarks and gluons, then we can climb up to, nucleus, and then atoms, and then molecules, and then neural systems, and then maybe the brain, in terms of getting the map. So again, I'm of course I'm aware of the neural correlates of consciousness and their important constraints, but targeting directly from the theory of conscious agents to that, I think, is not a wise move scientifically. You will be waving your hands and having just those stories for a long, long time if you just do that. I want precise data predictions.
To 6 right, 18. 5 left short of a crest, 15. 5 right of crest, and crest, it's a sudden.
So did you come to agree on both definitions?
60.
I think we have to be very careful about saying if we agree. I mean, if we straight away agree, it's not a very valuable agreement. It just sounds similar.
I remember that question. They've been asking a lot of questions, so they're pushing this question. They want to know where is the definition converge and where is it diverge. All of them want to hear from both of you.
Right. I asked this question to Brian Reed, the cosmologist at Columbia. He was launching his book until the end of time, which is more metaphysical than physics. So he was doing it at Harvard University, and at the book talk I asked him these theories, the cosmological theories in the Upanishads. How do you relate them to modern understanding? And he said something very insightful. He said, look, these theories in Vedanta, they are not scientific technically, but they seem to be poetic renderings of certain insights that we are getting in cutting edge science. So that's from Brian.
I think so. I think they're more than just poetic. I think that there's been some hard-won insights from years of meditation and deep thought. So it's beyond poetry, but But I would say that, yes, I think at top level, there is enough commonality of the ideas that it's worth pursuing, in the sense that I, as a scientist, would be well advised to listen to the insights from Vedanta and other spiritual traditions, again, with the same grain of salt that I give any of my scientific colleagues and their theories, right? You have to be hard-nosed about everything. But being hard-nosed and being closed-minded are two different things. And so absolutely be hard-nosed, but if someone was just talking nonsense, then I wouldn't even bother to try. So what I'm saying is it's clear that we're saying things that are very, very similar at top level. And so the insights that come from the spiritual traditions, I would be a fool to ignore them as a scientist, because I think that they're hard-won insights. And I would be a fool also to take them at face value, like I'd be a fool to take any scientific theory at face value. So there's hard work ahead, but the fact that there's enough agreement that it's worth doing that work is what's exciting to me.
Let me give you a specific example, not from science, but from the modern philosophy of mind. So when I studied the modern philosophy of mind, the basic course, the 101 course which people get in university, one immediately gets the impression that it's a field which has stalled. The last person who said something major breakthrough would be Descartes, more than 300 years ago. Cogito ergo sum, the mind-body dualism which is set up. And that's still the paradigm which is still struggling in the modern philosophy of mind. If you look at the papers and the philosophy of mind, the last 100 years, they neatly fall into two categories. There's one category trying to reduce mind and consciousness to neural activity, or to language, or to behavior, or some permutation of the information lately. And there's another group of papers which say, sorry guys, it doesn't work. Whether it is what it's like to be a bat, or Thomas Nagel's paper, or many other papers since. The paper about Mary seeing red for the first time, the color red, and so on. So this is where it is at. And my suggestion is that in order to break this deadlock and make some progress in the philosophy of mind, the insights of ancient Indian philosophy, I'm quite sure they'll be very helpful. I'm not just saying right away, but there are a number of Buddhist schools which I know have very powerful insights into mind and consciousness. So that's one area when we can dialogue and it can lead to progress. It's a very limited area, just the philosophy of mind itself.
No, I completely agree with that. And, the philosophy of mind is also intersecting with the science of mind. And so the science of mind can also help. And then here you see at Irvine, we actually have a lot of interactions between philosophy and science. We have a department that looks at that. And I agree, but I also agree that much of the current philosophy of mind and the science of mind is physicalist and reductionist or functionalist. And none of it, as we've said, none of it can give us, no theory can give us a mathematically precise account of any specific conscious experience. In terms of actually giving me a theory of, the taste of mint, the smell of garlic, a headache, the philosophers of mind and also the scientists who are trying to understand consciousness, give me a specific example that your theory takes care of. There's literally nothing that they can do. And at some point, that failure will cause a revolution. When they realize that the failure is principled, it will cause a revolution. And by the way, almost none of my colleagues in cognitive neuroscience and studying consciousness, almost none of them understand what's happening in high energy theoretical physics that's based on this doing. Many physicists don't know. I was in a conference a few months ago where there were a number of quantum theorists presenting their theories of consciousness. And I made a point at the end of several of them, of their talks, to ask them, well, what do you think about the work in high energy particle physics, theoretical physics, that says the space-time is doomed, and none of them had heard of it. So these are PhDs in physics. So my colleagues in cognitive neuroscience studying consciousness can be forgiven if they don't know about this. But the train is coming and it's going to wreck that whole program. The space-time being doomed is a huge train wreck for basically all of the current theories in the philosophy of mind. Most of the theories in the philosophy of mind, and basically almost all the theories in cognitive neuroscience and artificial intelligence for consciousness. And so when we're seeing some tremors, earthquakes in the field right now. There was a group just a couple weeks ago who put out a paper, more than 100 signatories, saying that one theory, integrated information theory, was what they called pseudoscience. So there's already the failures to produce any specific models of any specific conscious experiences are starting to lead to problems inside the field, I think. And at some point they'll realize that an actual paradigm shift is required. That functionalism and reductionism and physicalism all disappear when you realize that space-time is doomed. And the physicists are the ones who are telling us space-time is doomed. So it's time for us, consciousness researchers, to get with the program and start to think outside of space-time. Or we're just going to be the dinosaurs that are laughed at in the history books.
I think where science and philosophy and spirituality are agreed is, on this point, Patricia Churchland, she said, I remember reading her saying that we don't need philosophy to understand consciousness. We just need to do more neuroscience, and you keep doing neuroscience and you'll understand consciousness. That's what now we're beginning to see is not right. Scientists, philosophers of mind, and philosophers in the field of spirituality, we are sort of coming to this conclusion that just the physical investigation of the brain will not solve these questions of consciousness.
I agree. So it's not to say that we shouldn't do neuroscience. Of course we need to do the neuroscience, but that's not going to be the final answer. In fact, neuroscience, in my view, needs more funding because it's far more complicated than the neuroscientists realize. They think that when you look inside the brain and you see neurons, that's the truth, that's the reality. No, that's just an interface projection of something that's far more complicated outside of space-time. We have to reverse engineer what we see in the brain. The neurons, the neural networks, and the dendrites, and the synapses, and all that stuff. That, as complicated as it might seem, there's 86 billion neurons, and 84 billion other kinds of, there's just tons and tons of different kinds of cells. There's a new atlas that came out, there's 3,300 different types of neurons or something like that. So it's really complicated, but it's trivial compared to what's beyond that. It's just a projection of a much deeper reality, and we're going to have to reverse engineer neuroscience and understand the dynamical systems outside of space-time that project into what we call brain and neurons. And so I think we need neuroscience, but I agree with you that to say neuroscience is it, and that will give us the answer, absolutely not. It gives us the data that we need to explain with a theory that's completely outside of space-time.
So Don, throughout your extensive research and exploration of consciousness, I wonder if there have been moments of introspection where you question or maybe evaluate how have such moments occur in
3 left, 30,
yes,
6 right,
I came into this
square right,
research fundamentally physically as a framework in mind. I was raised in the Christian church, but all of us are physicalists and materialists just by nature. We are identified with our bodies. We're afraid of the death of our bodies. We are physicalists deep down, no matter what we say. And so I was a physicalist, and I consciously and unconsciously brought that to my research. But when my own research began to tell me that maybe everything that I was seeing was something that I was making up, that maybe this is just a headset. When that happened to me in 1986, we were working on this mathematical model of consciousness. And in 1986, I still remember the moment when it occurred to me what our math was saying, that basically this is just a headset, and everything I'm seeing is just a virtual object on my headset. It was just such a shock to me that I had to sit down for a while. I mean, it was just overwhelming. But I realized that my own mathematical modeling was forcing me to that conclusion. And later on, when I found that evolutionary game theory says the same thing, and then when I find the physicists are saying what space-time is doing, those are like big moments for me where my whole physicalist framework in some sense we're almost born in physics. Having that stripped off has been quite a shock to the system. So I do spend a lot of time in meditation trying to grapple with all this stuff that's so counterintuitive and so counter to my own emotional orientation.
Except in my case, in Don's case, it was breakthroughs, new knowledge, new paradigms. In my case, the tradition was giving me these understandings, but I just didn't get them. It was a deeper and deeper understanding of what I had always been reading and always been hearing. Clarity came over the years.
I started my journey last year because I started with Don, and I started with Bernardo, and then I started with philosopher before I get to the
left of the crest, 120, right of the crest, 300.
I'm going to move on to a very quick
right of the crest, 40,
so to both of you, so how do you differentiate between what is objective
6 right, 80,
our perceptions because we still live
5 left, tightens of the crest, 5 right,
so the way we will deal with this question in a better way is, you ask the question, what is the criterion of truth? If we keep making claims about this is ultimately real, that's an appearance, immediately you have to define how do you define truth? How do you define reality? And in Indian philosophy, we have multiple definitions of reality, of truth, criterion of truth. I'll just put before you two theories of two criteria of reality. One, the Buddhist criterion, or the Advaita Vedanta criterion. Then the contrast will make it clear what we are talking about. The question is, how do you decide what's truth? The Buddhist criterion is practical efficacy. If a thing works and has effect as it is expected to have, there's water and you drink it and it quenches your thirst. It feels cold and it quenches your thirst. So it's water. It's real. Whereas the water in a mirage is not real, because when you go there and try to use it the way it's supposed to be used, it doesn't work. So you clearly realize it's not there. That's practical efficacy is the criterion of truth. If it works, it's true. And it's amazing what a resonance it has with modern American philosophy, the whole school of pragmatism, William James, Charles Peirce, and everybody. Now, the Advaita Vedanta says to this is that, look, practical efficacy cannot be a foolproof criterion of truth. You could drink water and quenches your thirst, and the next moment you could wake up, and it was all a dream. So the water was in a dream, and your thirst was in a dream, and experience of drinking water was in a dream. It was cancelled. So, Advaita Vedanta criterion of truth is non-cancellability. So, the classic example of a snake and a rope, you realize it's not a snake, it is a rope, and mistook it for a rope. That which cannot be cancelled is real. Now, what is it that can never be cancelled on principle? Advaita Vedanta says all cancellation depends on consciousness. You have to be conscious of an error. It seemed to be true. Now you have to be conscious of. You realize, oh, that was not true. This is true. Now, the only thing that cannot be cancelled in this picture is consciousness itself. Because if you have the experience of cancellation of consciousness, you still have consciousness cannot be cancelled. This is kind of a distant echo of Descartes' I think, therefore I am. The only one thing that cannot be doubted. So yes, this is the criterion. Everything is a perception to consciousness. Consciousness itself is revealed to itself as the ultimate truth, the ground of all perception. Keeping the proviso that as far as our practical life is concerned, you're driving a car, going out shopping, all of that works within the headset using Don's metaphor. All of that has to be given due importance. You can't dismiss it as a dream. Within the realm of perception, within the realm of projection, science works, common sense works, art, religion, all of them have their spheres of observation. So all of it is grounded in consciousness, but as understood in the consciousness in itself, the non-dual reality.
I like that. I think that's a very, very good answer. And I would just add a couple little things from the scientific point of view. there's a technical notion called local realism, which is like particles satisfies local realism. It has a definite value of properties like position, momentum, and spin, and those properties have definite values even if they're not observed, and the locality, that's the realism part. The locality is so they have influences that propagate through space-time, and that's not and local realism appears to be false. The Nobel Prize in 2022, just last year, was for empirical confirmation of predictions of quantum theory that local realism is false. So we have, from a scientific point of view, it's still some controversy. There are some scientists who, like I think Sabina Hassenfelder, who would say it's not really local realism that's false. It's really maybe the superdeterminism is true or something like that. So I mean, there's still some debate to be had, but at least the question has a precise statement in physics, and experimental tests are being done on it, and it appears that local realism, in the sense of local realism, is false. And maybe Sabina will be able to show that superdeterminism takes care of it, and local realism doesn't have to go out the window. My guess is that local realism is false and superdeterminism may be true both. So it's not either or. What that means is if the particle doesn't have a position when it's not observed, it's not there. If you don't have a position, you're not there. So it's not real in the sense. If I'm wearing a VR headset and I'm playing Grand Theft Auto, and I see in my VR set a red Ferrari to my right, well, that red Ferrari only exists when I look and render it on my headset. As soon as I look away, there is no red Ferrari. There's not in the supercomputer that's running the game. There's no red Ferrari anywhere. So the red Ferrari has a position and a color and a shape only when I look. So local realism is false for the red Ferrari because the red Ferrari is just a headset symbol that pops up and renders when I look. And that's what it looks like physics is telling us about space-time. Particles are like the red Ferrari. They don't have a position or momentum and spin when you don't look because you haven't rendered them yet. So you have to render them in your headset. So that's one way in which we could say that realism in the typical sense is false, and which would agree with what you were saying. And there's another, I'll just put out a little distinction between sometimes the word real, when we use the word real